Everybody look up. Praise, praise, praise. If you can't hear what we're trying to say from the pulpit every Sunday, then we'll condense our thoughts into a cheesy line and slap it up on our time. Everybody look up. Can't take the heat outside. This church is preconditioned. CH space CH. Yep, you are's what's missing. We'll have you begging please and praying on your knees with our catchy church and knees. And that's why God responds to an email. You know you love it. You know you love it. You know you love it. See what we did there? Wrinkled with burdens. Come get a faith lift from these fun-filled sermons. We're making church signs. You know you love it. You know you love it. You know you love it. If you're a bad girl and you're feeling restless, stop counting sheep and talk to the shepherd. Everybody look up. If you don't want sunburn, better use some sunscreen. Think the church ain't sexy. We got 50 shades of grace. You can't ignore us. Praise. When our God who's for us, praise. He made Chuck Norris. Praise. Everybody look up. Do you need a lifeguard? Well, ours can walk on water. There is no need for Harry, cause Jesus is the potter. With lines so trite and cliche, you wanna fight and beat me, but God will smite and defeat me. And that's why I'm logging on to Facebook. You know you love it. You know you love it. You know you love it. Wanna read a good book? Your wait is over. We have a holy book club. You don't even need Oprah. We're making church signs. You love our signs. You know you love it. You love our signs. You know you love it. You love our signs. You know you love it. Straight from the big guy. We know just what he'd say. Like, don't make me come down there. So then we put it on the freeway. Let go. One thing we ask of you is to look up at a sign when you're passing through. On the highways and the avenues, we post corny lines to make you wanna puke. If you're an atheist or a new age dude, and yes, even Catholics and the Baptists too. If you're feeling crazy or out of place, remember Moses once was a basket case. We got better Sundays than Dairy Queen. So what section would you like for eternity? Is it non-smoking or smoking? Right-wing voting, Tim Tebow, and one more they the only saving place that's open. Lift your hands and praise, and praise. We take songs like this, sing 'em with a twist, so we can feel relevant. Yeah, 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 yeah. We're part of Thou Shalt Not, don't you understand? You know forbidden fruit makes for a real bad jam. You know you love it. You know you love it. You know you love it. Now you can't unsee that. All the haters may tease us, but we're just representing for the little baby Jesus. We're making church signs. You know you love it. You know you love it. You know you love it. Welcome to our church world. We ain't too scholastic, but we're quite handy with letters made of plastic. Everybody look up. Everybody look up.
And welcome to Floor One. We are so excited that you are hanging out with us this morning. And today is a special day because we are doing a 1-week message called I Have Questions. If you remember, we do this every couple months where we take a very sensitive but very culturally relevant question that students are dealing with, and we just talk about it. We think this is important, and as families, we think it's critical to have these conversations early. So I just want to give you a heads up. We're going to talk about some sensitive material today. So if you've got some younger kids in the room, it may be a good idea to maybe see if they want to go hang out somewhere else. And then mom and dad, families, don't leave the room because it feels awkward. We want to encourage you to press into this issue. Watch this with your students and have this conversation, because today we're going to talk about consent. If you've spent any time on the internet, watched the news, or hung out in culture, you know consent is a powerful word. Consent matters. And because it matters, we want to take every opportunity we can to have conversations with students early. We know that culture shapes our students' worldview and culture shapes our students' relationships. And where students land on consent is going to have a profound impact on their lives. And so today we're going to encourage students not to look at consent through the lens of the world, which says, let's use the minimum standard for valuing people. But we're going to encourage students to use God's standard. You see, when it comes to people, God never uses the filter of consent. He uses the filter of honor. And we believe that when students express and expect honor, it has a profound impact on their lives. Families, we know sometimes the hardest part of tackling tough topics is to start the conversation. So today we're going to start the conversation. And it's our hope and prayer that you would continue that conversation with your student this week. We've got small group questions that we have posted on our Facebook group. We encourage you to grab a hold of those and just talk with your student about consent and how important it is and how impactful it is on their life. Well, I'm excited to jump into the message, but before we do that, let's take a minute and let's get our hearts ready by worshiping together.
Without hope, with no place to begin, your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested, my life began. Ash was redeemed, only beauty remains. My orphan heart was given no name. My morning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's a endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was a ransom He faithfully bore. He canceled my debt and He called me His friend. When death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's a endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose with our freedom in hand. That's when death was arrested, my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you.
So, true story, my life almost ended at the ripe old age of 7. I was in a very serious relationship in 3rd grade with a 2nd grader named Felicia. Now, when you are in a relationship with a girl with a name like Felicia, you know that someone like that doesn't require the petty, regular old 3rd grade gifts. She's much more sophisticated and way more impressed with things other than something I drew in 3rd grade art class. And so considering my current income and money situation, which was 0 in the 3rd grade, I took it upon myself, without talking to my mom, to take some of the jewelry she had in her box and give it to Felicia. I mean, my mom had a box full of jewelry, and I was watching, and she didn't wear most of it all the time, and so I didn't think it'd be a problem. And so over the course of 3 weeks, I would bring jewelry to my girlfriend at school until my mom found out. And I will still to this day never forget the look on my mother's face when she caught me. And that look still gives me nightmares. Thankfully, my mom had grace on me and didn't end my life, but allowed me to live. So what was the problem with this situation? Well, aside from petty larceny on my own mother, the problem was I took something without asking. Now, in the legal world, we call this consent. And you probably heard this word before, right? And so today, to get on the same page, here's how we're going to define consent. It is to agree to something or to allow something to take place. Now, consent is important because it's one of the tools that we use to keep our relationships in a healthy place. And so consent can apply to small things like when you're going out to eat, is it okay if we share food from each other's plate? May I please take a French fry from you without asking? That's an important issue. But consent also deals with really big things, like how far do we go physically in our relationship? And so you have definitely heard the word consent before, because if you've watched the news at all or scrolled through your social media feed, you've probably heard a story that takes place like this. Something really awful happened to an individual or to an organization because somebody did something without consent. They did something to somebody without asking. Now, that's a good definition of consent, but we got to be really careful with that, because that's ultimately the way that culture sees consent. Because the way that culture views things as being okay and not okay are this. If two people give consent, regardless of what they're doing, it's okay. That's the way that the culture views consent. And so what's dangerous about using that as your definition for consent is that if you're not careful, that definition can give you permission to do things that you're not supposed to do. Because in the end, really what we're always trying to figure out is what can I do without getting into any trouble? So if two of us are okay with what's about to happen, doesn't that mean that what's about to happen is okay? And the answer is no. And here's one of the reasons why. When it comes to consent, and specifically with the way culturally we value people, we tend to do, instead of doing what we should for somebody else, we try to do the least amount that we can. And so, you know this to be true, right? You've experienced this maybe even this week in your life. Maybe you happen to be the sarcastic person in your family. And so there's a really fine line between being sarcastic and funny and then crossing that line and being a jerk, right? And you've maybe even experienced this at school or on social media with the people that you share life with. Everybody's got somebody that they don't get along with. And so there's a really fine line between what I can say about that person and what I can say to that person without crossing a line where I'm going to have to now own my words, and my words may get me into a conflict. But we really see this a lot in our relationships. There is a line that we draw physically when we're dating somebody, and we say, we're going to go here and no further. But the difference between as far as we can go and too far is incredibly small. And so this is where the conversation gets a little awkward. And so I just want to encourage you to just press in here, especially if you're watching this with your family, because it's important. I get it. When you think about consent, most of us think about sex. And now you're like, okay, you just said that on TV in my living room in front of my parents. Is this okay? It is okay. We got to talk about consent. Because the issue with consent ultimately is sin. You see, for almost all of us, the foundation of all of our problems stems from this balance we try to play. We try to do the least amount of good, and we try to do the maximum amount of bad. And it's this weird game we play because we think if we do a little bit of good, we can do a lot of bad. Now, some of us, we do this consciously, like we know the game that we're trying to play. Some of us, we do it subconsciously. But the truth is, we all play it. I mean, be honest with yourself right now. Just take a moment and think. Think about the things that you do that you're not supposed to do. And think about the weird trade-off that you do to justify those things. You think, well, I did a little bit of this, so doesn't it make that okay? Or I'm in this space in my life, doesn't it make this okay? And the reason why I know that we all get this is because, yes, we have all done this, but unfortunately for most of us, we have had this very thing done to us. So here's some examples. And just, again, a heads up, some sensitive things we're going to talk about. So if there's some little ears in the room, maybe hit the pause button. See if they want to go hang out somewhere else. But again, man, press into this, families, because we got to have these conversations. Here's one we deal with all the time with our students. And we see this culturally in youth ministries across the country, sending inappropriate pictures. So what happens in that moment when somebody messages you and says, hey, I'd like some inappropriate pictures? There's that little bit of good for a whole lot of bad, right? Because that's probably not the first text you get when you start hanging out with that person. They probably send you some nice texts to act like your friend, and they just do a little bit of good to try to get a whole lot of bad. And maybe it's not requesting the picture. Maybe they're bold enough to send you an inappropriate picture that you didn't ask for, and that's now puts you in a very awkward situation. Maybe you've been in a relationship and the person that you're dating has pressured you to go further than what you feel comfortable with. And then maybe that person actually made you feel so guilty that you just went there. What do you do with that guy that you're dating that is constantly putting you down and constantly making you feel like you could never do any better than him? Or what about that girl that you're dating? And because of the game that she's playing with you and all the things she's brought into your life, you have a really hard time trusting her. Here's what I'm trying to say is that if any of these things have happened to you or anything similar, dealing with consent, you've probably been really hurt, and chances are you're probably really confused. I think we can all agree that consent matters. But is consent all that matters? I mean, think about this for a second. We talked about this minimum standard that we use for valuing people. And if consent is just the minimum standard, if we can get to a place that we're both okay with what's about to happen, so isn't what's about to happen okay? I think we're missing out, and I think we're setting ourselves up for failure. I mean, think about the relationship angles, right? Somebody sends you a message and says, hey, let's send some inappropriate pictures to each other. You don't really want to, but you're kind of okay with it, and they're kind of okay with it. So if we're both okay with it, isn't it going to be fine? But then what happens when you send the pictures? You don't feel okay. You see some things that cannot be unseen, and you've exposed yourself in ways that cannot be unexposed. And you think about the physical side of dating, right? Like you hit that line and you have to make a decision. Are we going to cross this line physically together? Well, you're okay with it. I'm okay with it. So isn't it okay? But what happens when you do that? It's not okay. You see, consent only focuses on the minimum standard. And it doesn't think about the future. It doesn't think about what happens after this moment and the people in your life that are going to be affected, because there's always a moment after the moment. So we owe it to ourselves to press deeper into the issue of consent, because I promise you, the deeper you press into consent and the more you think about what it really means, it's going to ultimately be the thing that focuses and manages all of the decisions you make in all your relationships. And if you are watching this right now and you are somebody who loves Jesus and you want other people to love Jesus, this is so important, because listen, consent is about so much more than sex. Consent is about valuing people. It's about the way that we treat people. It's what we ask from people. It's what we try to talk people into, and it's what we try to talk people out of. And I'm telling you right now, we have to go beyond consent. And so in the first century, Christianity was a brand new thing. I mean, it was so brand new that the people in Rome didn't have any preconceived notions about Jesus because most of them didn't even know who Jesus was. The only opinions people had about Jesus came from watching other people who claimed to follow Jesus, meaning this, the reputation of the church came from Jesus followers who represented Jesus. This is why Paul was so obsessed in all the letters he wrote to the churches about the way that we treat people. If you read his words, they're soaked with this deep passion to treat people exceptionally well. And so in one of the letters that he writes to the church in Rome, Paul says this, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Be devoted, honor, value, respect, love. I mean, it seems basic, right? I mean, you understand why we have to say this out loud. But here's what you need to know about first century culture. It was an individual culture. People didn't care about other people. People just cared about themselves. And so individuals had to take care of themselves. And so here we are, 21 centuries later, and guess what? Nothing has changed. We are an individual culture. And unfortunately, a lot of you know this. I mean, I know we're only a couple months removed from school, but didn't you see this every day walking through the hallways? People just care about themselves, and very rarely do they care about other people. And what's even more hurtful is you get that one person, that one relationship, and you think this is going to be different, and you get tricked. And they spend a lot of time doing a little bit of good so they can try to get a whole lot of bad. So here's what I'm wondering today. What if it could be different? What if there could be a better way that we could love each other and treat each other and ultimately love and treat ourselves? So Jesus, when he walked this earth, brought a new way to live. He called it a new commandment to love each other. And in that new commandment, he completely turned the world upside down with the way that we value people. And when it came to the way Jesus treated people, Jesus's minimum standard was to give people the absolute highest value. You see, for Jesus, it was way more than consent. It was about honor. And here's what honor says. Honor says, I'm going to treat you the absolute best that I can, despite what I want from you. Because honor isn't about me. Honor is about you. And Jesus, who is the one person who walked this earth that deserved more honor than anybody could ever deserve, spent his life honoring and serving others. You see, when God looks at people and he values them, he doesn't value them with the lens of consent, because consent is minimum. He values people with the lens of honor. That's maximum. So let's go back to some of those scenarios that some of you have unfortunately walked through. That person sends you that text message and says, hey, let's send some inappropriate pictures to each other. The lens of consent says, well, I'm okay with it, I guess, if you're okay with it, so it must be okay. And it's not. But the lens of honor says this, if I send an inappropriate picture to you, that's not good for you. That is not going to help you out, and that's not going to help me out. So the most honorable thing I can do right now is to say no. And let's go back to the relationship and the pressuring. Let's say that you're in a relationship with somebody and you are pressuring them to do things they don't want to do, or they're pressuring you to do things that you don't want to do. Like at some point you can pressure somebody and bully somebody long enough that they can kind of be okay with it. And that's what the lens of consent says. The lens of consent says, if you're okay with this, even kind of, isn't it okay? And it's not okay. But the lens of honor says this, listen, they don't want to do this. And putting them in a situation that says they don't, that clearly is bad for them. And maybe, just maybe, I need to get over myself and stop bullying this person and grow up. And I got to realize that this look is not good for me. This isn't honorable at all. And then even in a relationship where both people are okay with things, like you set that line and you say, we're not going to cross this line, and you get there. And both of you are okay with it. Like you feel comfortable that we can take this next step. I mean, isn't that what the lens of consent says? I'm okay with it. Are you okay with it? But honor goes beyond the moment. Honor says that this person I'm with right now, This is somebody's daughter. This is somebody's son. This is somebody's future spouse. This is going to be the mother or father to other children. And there is moments beyond the moment. And what I might do with this person right now is going to affect all of those relationships. And it's going to affect all of my relationships. So the most honorable thing I can do right now in this moment is to say no. And so here's what I want to do. As we start to wrap this thing up, I want to give you a phrase that I really believe if you can let this become rooted in your heart, it could drastically change your relationships. And here's what it is. You should express and expect honor. Express and expect. So we've been talking about this, right? Like this is, how do you express honor? How do you give honor to people? How do you treat people the absolute best regardless of what you want from them? And I think there's a couple steps that's going to help you out with this. I think the first step is this. You need to ask this question. Am I doing what's best for the person in front of me? Am I really doing what's best for them? And here's the thing that's going to get you, right? Stop looking at people the way that you see them and start looking at people the way that Jesus sees them. You should ask this question. Would Jesus do this? Like I try to play this trick on my kids all the time. And sometimes it works. Most of the time it doesn't. But when they're acting a certain way, I just say to them, hey, would you talk to Jesus like that? Would Jesus talk to you like that? And I know that sounds churchy and cheesy and whatever, but it's true. I don't know about you, but I want to make every decision I make through the lens of Jesus, because I know this, there is nobody who has loved me and cared for me and will continue to love and care for me like Jesus. He's the standard of care for everybody. Even people in the world who aren't Christians and who don't believe that Jesus is God will tell you, if you treat people like Jesus, that's probably a good thing. And so step one is that. Ask that question. Am I doing what's best for the person in front of me? Am I treating that person the way that I know Jesus would treat them? And I think the second step is to take a hard look at the lens that you are looking at people. Are you a consent person or an honor person? I'm going to give you a clue real quick where you're going to land. If you spend most of your time in your relationships trying to convince people to say yes or no to something, you're a consent person. But if you spend your time developing deep relationships with people, loving people the way that Jesus does, and respecting their wishes, you're an honor person. And then let me give you another step. You should accept the no. You want to know one of the best ways you can honor somebody? Accept their no. Let me give you a secret. Maybe you don't know this, but do you know what no means? It means no. And there's a reason that somebody is saying no. You need to honor that. And maybe depending on what they just said no to, maybe you need to do some reflecting on yourself. I know that honoring people is hard. And one of the reasons why I think honoring people is hard and ultimately valuing people is hard is because for a lot of us, we don't value ourselves. Listen, it is impossible to express honor towards somebody else if you do not expect honor for yourself. It is almost impossible to value somebody completely if you have no value over yourself. So in order for you to express it, you are going to have to expect it. And I want to tell you something right now. And I just want to encourage you to lean in, because I know when we start talking about stuff like this, it starts stirring up some stuff in your heart. It stirs up some memories. It stirs up some feelings. And there may be some of you that are watching right now and you're not feeling very good because of the things that you're thinking about that you've experienced in your life because somebody looked at you through the lens of consent. But I want you to lean in. I want you to look at me. You are valuable. And you deserve to be honored. And here's why I know that. Number one, you exist. You're a person, a living, breathing person. And Scripture says that you and I are created in the image of God. Scripture says that we are His masterpiece, meaning this: God doesn't make junk. You are not junk. And here's what else I know. Jesus gave His life for you. He says in John, for God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son. So loved you, the world. I challenge you. If you think that's not true, find it. Go into the scriptures, find that verse where you're excluded from all those things because you exist, you're created in the image of God, and because Jesus gave his life for you, you have value, even if you don't feel like you have value. It doesn't change the fact that it's true. Listen, there's a lot of things in this world that I think are pretty junky that have a lot of value. Here's a great example. My grandfather has a garage full of junk. Remember, I was in the garage one day and he holds up this ugly pot and he's like, look at this. I was like, yeah, it's an ugly pot. He goes, no, this thing's worth $900. Like, $900? That's an ugly pot. You see, in that moment, I didn't think that thing was valuable, but it didn't change the fact that it was valuable. And unfortunately, you've come across people in your life that have treated you with no value, have talked down to you and disrespected you and used and abused you. And you have believed their truth into your life. And I'm so sorry. But it doesn't matter what they did to you. It doesn't matter what they said about you. And I say this respectfully. It doesn't even matter what you feel. There is nothing that anybody could do to you, especially you, that could change your value in God's eyes. You are valuable. You deserve honor and respect. And I think there's some ways that you can get it. And I think the first is this. I think you should start practicing no. Start practicing no. I get that maybe the reason why you've experienced the things you've experienced is because you've been pressured into things and you hate confrontation. And so it's just easier to go along with it than to say no. Practice no. And maybe don't go after the big no's right now, because I know that's tough. Start with the small ones. Start saying no to the small things. And put protection around you so you don't have to face the big ones. This is a great time to get some accountability into your life, to reach out to a small group leader, to talk to your parents, to get some good friends, people that love Jesus and want to love you the way Jesus loves you, that believes what God believes about you, and let them know, I can't say no to these things. And so here's what I would encourage you to do. Give them a code word and say, hey, if I'm in a situation that I can't say no to and I can't back out of, if I text you this code word, could you call me? And could you bail me out? Because I don't have enough strength to say no, but I got enough strength to answer the phone and say, I got to go. Practice your no's. And then the second thing I'd encourage you to do is determine right now how you want to be treated. This is a great moment to decide how you want to be valued. And I don't care what's happened to you in the past. I don't. And I say that with love. I really don't. The reason why I don't care what's happened to you in the past is because God doesn't care what's happened to you in the past. And I hate that we can't change what's happened. And I hate that we can't change where you've been. But we can decide what we're going to do right now in this moment today. And right now in this moment, you can determine what your value is. And then I just want to finally encourage you to speak up. Here's my guess. You probably did say no. And you got pressured, bullied, talked into saying yes. And somewhere along the way, you just stopped speaking up because you just felt like your voice didn't matter. And I just want you to know you still have a voice. And it still matters. I know maybe nobody listened to you then. But people can listen to you right now. And listen, I get it. Like this is awkward. It's uncomfortable. It's confusing. But we got to talk about consent. I mean, imagine a world where we stopped using consent as the filter and we used honor. Imagine a world where we honored everybody. Imagine what your world would look like if everybody honored you and you honored everybody. Here's my guess what that world would look like. I think your relationships would be better. You're not worried about what people are trying to get from you because everybody's trying to give you something, because that's what you do in a culture of honor. You're giving so people can experience the best. And I also think in a culture of honor, you're going to have way less regret because there is no line. There is no how far is too far. There is no what can we do, because that's what consent says. But honor says, no, we're not even going to go there because that's not what's best for us. And I think what we're going to find in a culture of honor is high value. Something powerful happens when you have high value in yourself and the people you share life with has high value in themselves. Like things get done. And that's how the world changes. I know maybe right now you're thinking, Adam, that's great, but man, I've been hurt pretty bad. And there are some things I really wish I could take back, but I don't think I can. And it reminds me of this scene from a movie from the 80s, a little hit called The Goonies. If you don't know what The Goonies are, I promise you someone in your house surely has seen this movie. So The Goonies is about a group of teenagers who go on this crazy pirate treasure hunt. And halfway through the movie, they think they've found the gold. They walk into this cave and there's this hole up in the ceiling where the water is coming in from a waterfall, and there's money everywhere, and they think it's the gold, but it's not. It's just money. It's change. They're actually at the bottom of a local wishing well. And as they're talking about the wishes that each of these coins represent from all the years of people throwing them down the wishing well, there's a character, his name's Mouth. He starts grabbing the coins. He starts sticking them in his pocket. One of the girls walks up to him and says, "Hey, you can't do that. Those are people's wishes. You can't take those." And then there's this moment where he holds up a quarter and he says,
"Yeah, but you know what? This one right here. This was my dream, my wish. And it didn't come true. So I'm taking it back. I'm taking them all back."
And maybe that's where you're at right now. Maybe there are some things that have happened to you that you never wished would have happened. And you want nothing more than to take it back, but you can't. And I just want to give you some encouragement. You don't have to try to figure out how to take it back, because Jesus has already taken it back for you. You see, that's what Jesus did when he gave his life on the cross. When he died on that cross, he died for all the sins that you committed, and he died for all the sins that were committed against you. And all the shame and the pain and the guilt that you have felt in those moments, Scripture says he took that pain, he took all those things, and he gave his life, and when he did it, he took it back. He took back everything that was taken from us. In his letters to the church in Colossae, Paul says these words: "When you were stuck in your old sin, dead life, you were incapable of responding to God. God brought you alive right along with Christ." Think of it, all sins forgiven, the slate wiped clean, that old arrest warrant canceled and nailed to Christ's cross. He stripped all spiritual tyrants of their sham authority. Here's what I just want you to know. This is the new movement of Jesus. This is love. This is honor. That in that moment, all of those things, all of your shame, all of your guilt, he wiped it clean. He took it back. And he silenced all of those negative voices in your life. Anybody that would stand up against you and say, "This is who you are because of what you've done," because of Jesus, we can look them in the face and say, "No, this is who I am now because of what Jesus did." And I know saying those words can't, in this moment, take away your pain. But I hope saying these words in this moment can begin the process to heal you. Because you have value. Your words matter. You deserve respect, and you deserve honor. So I just want to encourage you as we get ready to pray. Man, take a hard look at consent. Reestablish who you are in the eyes of God. Jesus, we thank you so much for this moment that we get to share on the screen. God, I thank you for your truth. God, I thank you that we have value despite what people may speak into our lives and despite what people have done to us. Help us, God, to value ourselves the way that you value us so that we can express it properly to other people, and that we would no longer settle for consent being the filter in which we value people, but we would value people through the filter of honor. And that we would do the best for them the way that you did the best for us. Jesus, we say these things in your name. Amen. Well, hey, I just want to say thank you so much for hanging out with us today, especially during this tough topic. Families, thank you for sticking with us. And we just want to encourage you to take a moment, go to Facebook, pull up the group questions, talk about them as a family. Listen, we started the tough conversation, but please take time, continue talking through it. Listen, we love you guys. We cannot wait to see you again face to face. We're praying for you, believing that this week's going to be the best week. You guys have a great day. We'll see you next Sunday.